Warning: the content in these videos is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. We do not condone or promote any of the actions depicted or described. These stories are presented to educate the public and share true events. Some material may be disturbing or inappropriate for certain audiences. We do not recommend that children watch these videos without direct adult supervision. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. True Crime Guide. On a cold November night in 1974, a quiet suburban street on Long Island became the scene of something so ordinary and then so unimaginable that it would haunt headlines for decades. Behind the white trim and manicured lawn of 112 Ocean Avenue, 6 people lay dead. They were a family, known to neighbors as the DeFeos. The man who would be accused of that night's violence was their eldest son, Ronald DeFeo Jr. He would later tell different versions of why he did it. Voices, a drug-fueled blackout, or simply an act he could not explain. The court would call it murder. The town would call it tragedy. And the house would call itself something else entirely. A year later, another family drove up that same driveway, drawn by sunlight on freshly painted siding and the idea of a fresh start. George and Kathleen Lutz, with 3 children in tow, bought the house at a discount and moved in on a winter's afternoon in December 1975. They were, by all accounts, an ordinary family chasing a new life. What came next would turn their private days into one of the most controversial stories of the paranormal age. They lasted 28 days. The Lutzes left in the middle of January, shaken, exhausted, and adamant that they had been driven out by forces they could not understand. They told a story that multiplied quickly, a smell of rotting flesh that would appear without cause, a green slime that seeped from the walls. The bed they slept in seemed to tilt as though it were sliding toward the corner of the room. Children awoke with small puncture marks on their bodies, windows that would not stay closed, voices that spoke in words they did not know, a presence, invisible and malevolent, that seemed to stake a claim on the house itself. It was, when condensed down, almost too cinematic to be true. The Lutz's account came to the attention of a New York writer named Jay Anson. He was given the rights to the story. In 1977, his book, The Amityville Horror, hit shelves and sold like wildfire. The narrative was vivid, intimate, and terrifying, perfectly tuned to the era's appetite for the uncanny. Within months, Hollywood came knocking. A film arrived in 1979, a cultural touchstone that would make the phrase Amityville synonymous with haunted houses and demonic forces. But from the beginning, the story did not exist in a vacuum. There were the cold, factual bones of the place, the DeFeo murders, the grief-stricken relatives, the police reports, the coroner's notes. And there were the living people who had begun to gather in the orbit of the sensational account: journalists, paranormal investigators, priests, and inevitably, skeptics. Each group read the same house like a text and came away with different meanings. One of the most influential voices to claim a role in the story was a husband and wife team of New England paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren, whose name alone evokes a particular kind of modern folklore. They visited the house, declared it evil, and framed the Lutz's experiences within a demonic context. That framing mattered. It took personal terror and placed it inside a supernatural script that an anxious public was ready to accept or to fiercely dispute. Skeptics, for their part, began to pull at threads. Why would a family move into a house where a massacre had taken place and then quickly leave, only to sell their story to a writer? Why did certain details seem to shift slightly each retelling? Journalists dug into financial records and interviews and found inconsistencies. Some suggested the story had been embellished for profit and publicity. Others argued that elements had been exaggerated or even invented. The Lutzes denied outright fabricating everything, and parts of their tale, small, domestic horrors, stuck in the public imagination, whether or not they were supernatural in origin. At the center of the storm were the real human beings who had suffered, the DeFeo family and the Lutz family. both of whom would live with the consequences in very different ways. For the relatives of the victims, seeing their tragedy turned into entertainment felt like salt on a still open wound. For the Lutzes, the transformation of private fear into best-selling prose meant that grief, terror, and some say, opportunism, all became indistinguishable in the court of public opinion. The house itself became a character, its facade reproduced in posters, and its image printed on the covers of tabloids. The story was told and retold, and each telling added a layer. In films, the house groaned and shed paint like an old wound. In books, it whispered and pulsed with unseen forces. In courtrooms, lawyers argued over who had a right to profit from the tale. In basements and late-night talk shows, investigators and armchair detectives argued about the line between hoax and haunting. What is striking, looking back, is how the Amityville story exposed something at once very modern and very old. It showed how grief can be harnessed into narrative, how fear can be shaped by cultural anxieties, and how easily a community can be split between believers and skeptics. It proved the media's power to take a local tragedy and turn it into global folklore. It also reminded us how messy the truth can be when profit and belief collide. Many of the most hair-raising details in the Lutz account are the ones that made the story so hard to ignore. The red-eyed figure seen in a window at night, the portrait of a man that seemed to change its expression, the sudden cold spots and corrosive smells. These images, repeated in Anson's book and the movies that followed, lodged in the cultural psyche. People who had never been to Amityville felt they had been there, felt the chill in those rooms, felt the prickling on the back of their necks. But in the years that followed, investigators revisited the scene and the records. Neighbors who had loved and lost to real human violence spoke of the Lutz's story with a weary incredulity. Some said they never experienced anything paranormal living in the house. Others maintained they had heard strange things occasionally, noises at night, a sense of unease, but nothing to match the theatricality of the book. Journalists obtained interviews and documents that suggested the Lutzes had been in contact with the book's author before they moved in, undermining the narrative that they had stumbled, innocent, into a waking nightmare. Despite claims of police involvement, official records show no reports filed from the Lutzes during their stay. And yet, even if one accepts the skeptical case that the Amityville Horror was at least in part manufactured, that does not erase the visceral power of the story. The idea of an ordinary suburban sanctuary turned into a site of malevolence taps into deep universal fears, that home might not be safe, that the familiar could become hostile, that the people we love or who once loved us could be taken away in a single night. Those themes explain why the tale persisted, why it was retold in script and screenplay, and why future generations would look at that yellow Dutch colonial and feel, for a moment, a shiver. There is also another kind of truth in the Amityville saga, the truth of human imagination. Stories shape memory. When a narrative becomes widely accepted, it can rearrange how events are remembered and reported. Anecdotes evolve into facts, facts into legends. The Lutz's account, whatever its exact origins, became a shared myth that allowed people to confront fears in a safe, vicarious way. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue stopped being merely a place where a family had been murdered. It became a mirror in which collective anxieties about evil, family, and American suburbia were reflected back, amplified, and dramatized. There are quieter footnotes to the story that deserve attention too. Over the years, other occupants of the house have come and gone. Some reported nothing unusual. Others told stories curious enough to keep the rumor mill grinding. The town, for a time, tried to live around the myth, siding with the living, honoring the dead, and marketing the macabre in different measures. The Amityville saga became a cottage industry. Books, sequels, sequels to the sequels, documentaries, endless retellings that fed on the appetite they helped create. And what of the people who lived it? The DeFeo family never fully recovered from the violence that split it apart. The Lutz family, whether emboldened by truth or complicated by fiction, carried the weight of public scrutiny that too often accompanies sensational stories. The writer who told it and the filmmakers who adapted it all left their fingerprints on a narrative that would outgrow them and become something larger and messier than any one version. In the end, the house remains a kind of monument, not to demons perhaps, but to the ways we tell stories about fear. It stands as a reminder that tragedy can be transformed by grief and by commerce into legend. It teaches us that mythology often needs only a kernel of truth to grow, a detail to seed the imagination, and an audience willing to believe. So when you hear the phrase, the Amityville Horror, what are you hearing exactly? Are you hearing the echo of a terrible human act? The rattle of police evidence bags? The quiet grief of a town? Are you hearing a family's terror in a house they felt they could not inhabit any longer? Or are you hearing a tale shaped by market forces, by storytelling craft, by the hunger for a thrill that sells books and movie tickets? Perhaps it is all of those things at once. Perhaps the truth, as is sometimes the case, is not a single clear fact, but a palimpsest of experience, interpretation, and invention. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue is a place where lives intersected, choices were made, and stories were born, stories that have haunted popular culture for nearly half a century. Whether you believe in demons or in the power of narrative, the Amityville story reveals a colder but equally chilling fact. Human beings are skilled at creating meaning out of chaos, and sometimes the meanings we create are the very things that haunt us. And so the house waits, as houses often do, an architecture of memory, a container for stories. Whatever spirits, metaphorical or imagined, are said to inhabit it, the real presence that lingers is the history we insist on telling. It is there, in the pages and the footage and the whispered retellings over late-night gatherings, that the Amityville Horror lives, not only as an account of an alleged haunting, but as a mirror reflecting our darkest curiosities about home, harm, and the stories we make to hold them. Thanks for watching True Crime Guide. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. If there's a story you'd like us to cover, drop it in the comments below. Your favorite case may just be next. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.